Hi, I'm Andy Acton.
And I'm Chris Strevens.
This is Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. I guess Cat Edney, she's lovely, and I've met Cat at many events and had kind of conversations as you do with lots of people, but they tend to be contained to sort of 2 or 3 minutes as you're heading to a function or you're dashing somewhere else. That long form conversation with her was just so enjoyable.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. You know, you meet her and she's a lovely person to talk to, but you almost have previously been soundbite conversations, haven't they? Because they're sort of like not fillers, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But fascinating. Yeah. Fascinating. Her rebellious streak, which I would not have said was a rebellious streak, but there obviously is sitting in there.
But it's funny because listening to her talk, she's a rebel, but it kind of makes sense for the work she's doing, for the position she has in dentistry. It kind of does make sense, but she does it in her own way.
She has that bit of resilience, that strength in her core.
Yeah. No, really interesting
really
episode. Really good episode. And yet again, we have a guest who is somebody who has such varied experience and valuable knowledge to share with our listeners.
Monday morning.
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
It can only
Just
mean
got
one
out of
thing.
bed. That's very good.
It can only mean one thing. It's a new episode.
A lovely podcast.
It is. So here we are today. We're so fortunate, and we have a delightful guest, somebody we know really well. It's Cat Edney. Welcome, Cat. How are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me.
Not at all.
Pleasure.
You are the dental therapist extraordinaire, and we're going to talk all about you, your work, dig into what a dental therapist is, find out how we compare to other parts in the world. And I'm looking forward to it. So before we start, we would like to kind of get a sense of the person we're talking to and kind of get back to the beginning. So just give us a sense of who you are. Where did you get brought up? Mum, dad, siblings?
Background.
What was like, when you were a small cat?
What
did that look like?
Oh my goodness. I always, whenever someone asks me this question, I always feel a bit awkward because I don't think I had a very normal. I had a really normal upbringing, but really not normal in the same way that we were extremely traditional British family, very old-fashioned sort of values. And so, I was a bit different at school in that we didn't really watch TV and we didn't really have popular culture as a thing in our household. So I feel a bit awkward about talking about that because, growing up, we lived in like a really lovely sort of Victorian house, like a Victorian villa, basically.
Where did you grow up, Kat?
In Bromley in South London.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
So I haven't moved very far. I'm still really close. I'm about 10 minutes drive away. But also the family that I grew up in was really traditional as well. So, when I went to school and everyone was talking about what was going on EastEnders that night, I hadn't a clue what anyone was talking about. And I didn't.
Was this a conscious decision on your parents' part just to limit exposure to that sort of culture, or was it just you were just doing other things?
I don't think so. I think that they just had different interests. Classical music. I did a lot of training. I've done my grade 8 piano, used to be a singing teacher. And I went to music school for the weekends. But there wasn't really any, like I say, popular culture. And I was a bit of an outcast because of that. So I didn't have that ability to sort of have conversations with people in my peer groups because they were all listening to Spice Girls.
Yeah.
And I was listening to Bach.
So you were doing Dvorak
and that thing, when you were a kid, being in a tribe is quite important, isn't it? Yeah. That having that group and even in the workplace now. I was talking to somebody recently and they provide outsourced services and most of their workers are in the Philippines and the Far East. But they get the people who live in the Philippines to watch trending television programs. So Traitors is a big thing at the moment. Lots of people are watching it. So the people in the Philippines would have an understanding of the concept and possibly even know what's going on in Traitors. So when they can talk to people, they feel part of the tribe in terms of understanding. So I can understand for you being at school how it could be a bit isolating.
Did you feel isolated?
I was hugely isolated, hugely. I made friends, but never like really close relationships, really close friendships. And I felt awkward bringing people home, and so because of that, and also because I am the youngest of four, My 3 siblings they're all close in age, and then there's a 5-year gap, and then there's me.
Right.
So I sort of rebelled quite a lot.
I was going to say, because I wondered what you're going to be like in a teenager.
Yeah, I was extremely rebellious. I mean, I was an awful child. And I still have it in me now, this sort of really intense sense of justice and rebellious sort of like spirit, because I wanted to really, say this isn't right. I don't want to be like this. I want to be different, and I don't want to hold the same views as maybe my parents or my parents held. And I don't want to do the same things that everyone else does. I don't want to conform to tradition. So I was extremely
So what
rebellious.
colour was your hair? Did you dye your hair some bonkers colour?
No, do you know what? I mean, the worst I went was platinum blonde.
All right. You didn't go like pink and spiky or something.
Terrible. I didn't have loads of piercings, although I did get a tattoo at 14, which is dreadful, isn't it? But no, my rebellious nature was more around rebelling against the system at school, rebelling against not being allowed to play with certain children who were from certain backgrounds, those sort of things.
Wow.
I'm hearing the word detention in here.
Well, actually, it was more exclusion.
Oh, right. Wow.
Okay, excellent.
So I ended up, my mum, bless her, she's just the loveliest person. She's so sweet and kind. She's a GP. She was a GP's nurse. And she scrimped and saved and funded me for the last 3 years of my education to go to a very small, failing, closing down Catholic convent.
Wow.
So I went from a huge state school where I was not doing well at all and was predicted to not get really very many GCSEs at all, to this Catholic convent. We were taught by nuns who were in their 90s. There were 16 of us in the year, and I loved it. I had the most amazing last 3 years.
Is it funny how putting somebody into the right environment, not an obvious one, but the right environment
Talk
works.
about resisting and rebelling against tradition. And then being taught by a bunch of old nuns. It's sort of like, hang on a minute.
I think what the difference was that they were so accepting of every personality, every type, and also encouraging of me being different or having different views. Whereas in my previous state school, I went to a girls' school, and the girls were genuinely, I'm not that old, but genuinely there was a lesson where we were taught how to iron. And,
What? Really?
In home economics.
How to iron. Excellent.
How to iron.
Wow.
And I just...
That's not that long ago. I'm not, because you're not old, are you?
I'm not. I'm almost 40, but I'm not 40 yet.
I mean, flip.
That's mad, isn't it?
I mean, that is. But when you listen now, you think really that's probably like how to make your man a nice cup of tea or something.
Yeah.
So did you decide quite early on that dentistry was going to be a profession you were going to pursue? So when you went to the Catholic school, was that already something you were thinking about, or was that still way off the radar?
So what happened was I went from not being allowed to take GCSEs that would get me more than a C to being offered the opportunity to do triple science and extra maths, pure maths, and being supported. And actually all the girls that I liked were in those classes. So they were in chemistry, biology, maths. And so although dentistry wasn't really on my radar, I just chose the subjects that I really enjoyed.
Right.
And then all the girls that were in those classes were going off to do medicine.
Right.
So I rebelled and said, I'm not going to do medicine.
There's a theme here already.
And there was one girl in my class who I sat next to, Maria Casey. She was just brilliant, beautiful, and she had an Irish father who was a dentist. And Maria and I weren't going to achieve the right grades to go and do medicine or actual dentistry, but we were looking at maybe trying to do something within the field, so biomechanics or something like that. And Maria said, my dad said, look at dental hygiene. So because she did, I did as well. I didn't really look into it much. In fact, I hadn't really been to the dentist much
Wow.
as a child. So I didn't really know much about it, but I just thought, well, at the time with UCAS applications, you were allowed to apply to 6 universities, but only 4 could be medicine or dentistry. So I tried my luck and applied to 4 dental schools. And then for the last 2 places that I had left over, I applied to King's in Manchester for hygiene. And when I got my terrible A-level results, they were dreadful because the school had actually shut down by then. I was called by King's and they said, do you know what, we'll still have you
Wow.
if you'd like. So I went.
Wow.
Fabulous.
I love the fact of, if you really want to come, it's still on.
It's still there if you want
if you like. Oh, right.
It wasn't quite that simple, actually, because I took a gap year thinking maybe I'll do better if I take a gap year and try again. Because I can't even remember my A-level results. I think it was because I blocked it out, but I think it was a C and 2 Ds. But I took a gap year, and during that gap year, King's changed their course. So it was hygiene only, and then they changed it to a hygiene and therapy course. So when I called up to say I haven't had my enrollment, but I took a gap year from last year, they hadn't actually included me on the register because they'd actually changed the course. So it was a bit of a struggle because I had to beg and persuade to get them to let me back on because they had promised it to me the year before.
Yeah, flip.
So interestingly, if you hadn't taken a gap year and you'd just done what would have been the hygienist course then,
I wouldn't be here.
It may well be that you wouldn't have bridged the gap from hygienist to therapist, and your career wouldn't be on the trajectory it is. It's funny how that kind of decision to take a gap year has had a fundamental impact on your career and what you're doing now. Because in the introduction, I said you're a dental therapist, but I think that probably didn't tell the whole story in terms of, yes, you are a dental therapist, but you're a beacon of light to shine on what dental therapy is about. You lecture internationally, you coach people, you train people, you've got a course. You really are kind of pushing the boundaries of that. But it would be really useful to kind of do some quick fire questions around what a dental therapist is, because we've had many conversations about, where does it sit in dentistry and do people really understand?
Do you mean they're not just a posh hygienist?
Well, and this is the stuff. So to start with, how do you qualify as a dental therapist?
Well, there's 2 routes really. Either you go to a course, it's a BDS, it's a degree course now. It wasn't in my day, all those years ago. But it's a degree course now, and it's 3 years at university. Often training alongside as the first 3 years of dental school, the BDS course. Or there is, I think, either 1 or 2 courses where you can go and do a top-up from the hygiene course. And that's most commonly people go to Essex University and do a 1-year top-up. But for me, it was 2 separate diplomas, hygiene and therapy, that were running concurrently next to each other. So there wasn't really an obvious divide as to why we were learning one and the other, but I guess that's just the way that King's did it at the time.
Right. And how is a therapist different from a hygienist?
Well, the way I explain it to all of the dentists' practices and even patients that I talk to is it's sort of like halfway between a hygienist and a dentist. So I always say, I'm just like a hygienist, but I also get to do all the fun stuff a dentist gets to do. So all the checkup, the fillings, the extractions on children. I just don't have to do the gruesome things. So I don't have to do root canal. I don't have to do surgical. I don't have to extract adult teeth. And I don't place crowns. And that's it really. So any direct restorations a therapist can do. No limits.
Brilliant.
It was interesting, wasn't it? Where was that thing we went to? Dentorama, wasn't it?
Yes.
Was it Dentorama?
Yes.
I think you might have been there, Kat. I can't remember actually.
Yeah,
and I think you were. And that, wasn't it that dentist said, oh yeah, the therapist can only do certain types of fillings or something? And I could remember, it was almost like you could hear all the therapists. it was fascinating because I thought it was quite an interesting one because that was a dentist's view.
Yeah.
Whereas
That's
actually
what
what you're just saying
because
is you can do a
I think
filling.
there is a lot of misunderstanding, and I don't think people necessarily
And
know
that's a
where.
dentist.
Yeah.
There's a huge bias at the moment in dentistry, and that's really much dependent on what the team, not just dentists, but the entire team has experienced in the past. So if you speak to a dentist, say, have you ever worked with a dental therapist? They'll often say, yeah, I've worked with therapists all the time. But depending on what that therapist did, how their scope of practice was realised within the specific practice, within the constraints that they were working within, that has made that dentist or that team member form an opinion on what a therapist can do. But in very much the same way as a dentist has got a scope of practice that is all of the things they are allowed to do, that doesn't necessarily mean that they do them.
No.
Yeah.
And that's what we have with therapy. It's just really pronounced within therapy. 70% of dental therapists work as dental hygienists, which is a shocking statistic, I feel.
That's mad,
70% work as hygienists.
Because you're losing all that opportunity to change the fee structure of your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a huge void in practices where you could potentially take all of this, we call it the small bits, the little bits of work, the little fillings, the non-quadrant dentistry, the restorations that could be done maybe during a hygiene appointment. If you take that out of a dentist's diary, you open them up to having so much more space to do more profitable treatments. But there's been historical barriers to implementing that kind of work that we're only just seeing now. It's only really in the last, 4 months, actually, that barriers are being lifted so that therapists can truly work independently.
And what were those barriers and who imposed them?
So if we work backwards, the most recent barrier was prescribing rights. So being able to provide local anaesthetic and fluoride to your patients without having a dentist specifically write a prescription for your patient, or without having to have a document called a patient group directive, which covered a group of patients in a group of situations needing local anaesthetic. So that was a barrier. It was a huge barrier for NHS care because you couldn't use a patient group directive. I'm very fortunate. I've been working privately for years. Actually, I've never worked on the NHS at all. And so I've always been able to work under a patient group directive. So that was the most recent barrier that's been lifted, and that's taken years of work by our associations. They've been incredible.
Wow.
Working on that. So really it's in its infancy there. But then prior to that, if you go all the way back to 2012, that's when I was living in Canary Wharf at the time, and I was living next door to this guy who was in dentistry. He chatted about dentistry a lot. We used to watch the rugby together, drink beer, stand on our balconies. And, we had a lovely, I rented my flat from my boss in Canary Wharf. It was lovely. And we stood up chatting dentistry. And this guy used to ask me my opinions on direct access, because in 2012, direct access was being debated. The BDA were dead against it. Associations were kind of not sure if they wanted that hygienist or therapist to be allowed direct access, but it was being pushed by the Office of Fair Trading to allow hygienists and therapists to go direct. And this guy used to ask me the questions about it all the time. And it turned out, even though I didn't know it at the time because I, clueless and very naive, my neighbour was actually Barry Cockcroft.
Wow.
So I was stood on my balcony drinking beer with the chief dental officer at the time, saying to him, it doesn't matter whether direct access comes in or not, we do it anyway. So direct access is essentially a therapist or a hygienist being allowed to treat a patient without a dentist having seen that patient and said, I would like you to do X, Y, and Z on this patient. So without prescribing treatment.
Yeah.
I was saying to Barry, I was working in Canary Wharf as a hygienist at the time. And I said, do you have any idea how many times those prescriptions actually get written by my dentists? It never happens. They never write, please see this patient for X, Y, and Z and all the things you need to do. They just say, see hygienist. And it's not a good enough prescription anyway. So you may as well let direct access come in.
Interesting.
And lo and behold, May 2013 it did. So it's been 10 years.
Wow. And why is it...
everybody, you should credit Cat with a very important beer drinking, rugby sharing influence.
But why is it that practices even now, 70% of therapists are still only doing hygiene? What's the barrier that's not getting dentists to engage with therapists to the level they can, could, and should?
I think it's fear. I think you're absolutely right. It's fear. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I truly believe every clinician has imposter syndrome. And I think that is true in therapists and in dentists. The model of dentistry so far has been very much a siloed one-man band model. So it doesn't matter whether you've got 5 dentists working in a practice, they're actually working very often as an individual entity within that practice. So they have their own list, their own nurse, their own surgery, their own patients. And they don't want anyone else seeing their patients.
Yeah.
That's their patient. You know, firstly, for a financial concern, they think if they allow their patients off to see someone else, they're losing out on money. They don't see the bigger picture. But also they're worried about judgment. They're worried about failure. They're worried that, you know, maybe I've got that diagnosis wrong and someone might think I'm wrong to plan this treatment on the patient. And also what might happen if it doesn't work? Will the patient lose faith in me? And then it's the other side that we don't have confidence within our profession. Therapists are not confident, especially therapists who qualified like I did. I qualified 2008 and then didn't do any therapy for 9 years.
How did that feel?
Oh, dreadful! Because
you're qualified to deliver a skill to a certain standard, but basically you're just being ignored,
not
overlooked.
given the opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, I had this drawer in my hygiene room. It was my therapy drawer, and I'm not going to name any names, but it was my therapy tutor. One of the tutors was the associate in my practice who should have been referring to me. Never did, not once. But we set up a drawer together of burrs, one fast hand piece, and some composite, and it sat there for 9 years, never opened.
Wow, have to blow the dust off.
Yeah, it was really
That's dreadful, isn't it?
Soul destroying. It's soul destroying, but at the same time, dental hygiene is really rewarding as well. So you are getting to do a lot of your job that's really rewarding. When I trained as a therapist, I was pretty much trained to believe that we wouldn't really get to do any therapy anyway. It was kind of like a curse.
Really?
Well, even at the training stage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really an institutionalized view.
Has it changed now, Kat?
Oh, completely. Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
good.
there's dental schools out there that I've visited who are so proactive. I mean, Peninsula Dental School, as it comes to mind straight away, they're so incredibly pro-therapist. They're wonderful. And actually, the graduates that come out of that school are incredible. They're so proactive as well. They're amazing, level of confidence in those therapists.
Is there a financial incentive for people to deliver therapist work or become a therapist over a hygienist? Is it more financially rewarding if you're genuinely being used and treated as a therapist? Would you earn more money?
I would say that really varies by region.
Right.
So the therapist that I talk to in the north, it's a very different story to the therapist in the south. So if you're in the north, you tend to be salaried or hourly rate pay. You tend to be working on the NHS and via referral. So you don't have control over your diary. You don't have control over what comes through. You get paid the same regardless of what you do. And it's hard. It's hard to make any money being a therapist. You tend to make more as a private hygienist.
Okay.
But in the south, if you manage to get a job as a therapist, it's much more rare, but you're more likely to be looking at a UDA rate or a percentage rate of pay. You're more likely now, especially in the last few years where we've been really banging this drum about direct access and therapy-led and autonomy, you're more likely to be able to control your own diary. I mean, the way I work now is that I do my checkups and I do my own treatment plans. And then I send the work that's appropriate for the dentist to the dentist, fill their diary up with the juicy stuff, Invisalign and crowns and veneers and what have you. And I do the work that I feel confident to do. So for me, it's definitely much more profitable being a therapist. I mean, I now work 3 days a week. I used to work 6,
It is bonkers, isn't it, that dentists don't see the benefit?
Yeah.
But I suppose in a reverse way, I suppose we quite often see people who want to grow a business and we say you have to employ someone to grow that business, but it's going to cost you money in the short term until you sort of get past that point. And it's sort of almost a similar reluctance, isn't it, to say, well, hang on a minute, I could get rid of something from my book, as you were saying, that you could do where they and then if the partnership is truly correct, you're giving back considerably more than they're giving, if that makes sense.
That's it.
And it's just like, I don't understand. Well, I suppose it's that back to everyone's doesn't think about either the value or they're worried about losing patients. It's mad.
It's even more complex than that, because you might currently have a hygienist who is a therapist but working as a hygienist with a very limited room income. So their cost of their surgery for that day is, quite a high cost, and they barely meet it with hygiene. We all know that hygiene is a bit of a loss leader. So actually, you're not utilising that room as well as you could be if you use that therapist even just to do the exams during the hygiene appointments, which is totally doable. You'd hugely increase the income of that room and create space in the dentist's diary. But then it's slightly more complex because hygienists tend to be fully booked for 6 months in advance. Dentists are not so fully booked, and especially feeling the pinch at the moment, we're seeing more white space in people's diaries. So it's that. And then there's also this problem that I hear all the time is, well, where can I find a therapist then? Where can I find a therapist who's super confident, who wants to take it all on? And that is hard. It is difficult. Confidence is an issue in our profession that, it's going to take a little while to get over.
But the environment hasn't exactly bred people to be confident, has it?
No,
If at the early stage of training, and I know it's changed with, it sounds like Peninsula doing great work, but if people were trained into an environment that says, we're never really going to use this, so whilst there's a therapy element, think of yourself as a hygienist, because that's kind of what you're going to end up doing. It's hardly creating the environment for people to kind of want to push
to
in that
grow
direction.
into, isn't it?
Absolutely. Oh, and then on top of that, the scope of practice of a therapist, what you can and can't do, really limits us and makes you providing treatment really quite worrying and scary, because if I expose on a patient, if I expose their nerve tissue, I can't manage it. I can't then go ahead and do an extirpation. I can't do a root canal treatment. If halfway through a restoration suddenly think, do you know, this actually needs more than I can provide, now I'm going to have a conversation with the patient. It's embarrassing. It's difficult. There might be a complaint. And, we're in this hugely litigious society now, especially in dentistry. So as a therapist, it's actually really hard to manage because we're limited by our scope of practice as well.
That's true. I suppose I hadn't really thought about that. If you're doing a filling and then somehow it's not, it's a worse filling, if that makes sense, then suddenly, you can't resolve it, can you?
Given the environment, Kat, is this becoming a more popular or less popular career choice? Because the picture you're painting, it sounds like it's quite hard and it's quite challenging. And I'm just interested to see whether perhaps at dental school level, are they oversubscribed for people to want to be therapists, or are they struggling to get people to see it as a positive career choice?
So when I went and applied to university, I remember distinctly being told there are 40 applications for every place. So you'll be really lucky to get in. 40 applications. Now there's something like 180 applications for every place. And I was talking, I had a work experience girl with me in my clinic yesterday. I love doing that. I love having someone there watching what we do. And I was talking to her about the fact that it's not the same as other university applications. It's not like the dental route where you do your A-levels and then you apply to become a dentist. And it's usually 18-year-old A-level leavers who are applying. In dental hygiene and therapy, not only have you got people applying from school who are leaving their A-levels, but you've also got 60,000 dental nurses who are also wanting to apply to do hygiene and therapy. Not everyone obviously wants to do it, but there is a huge cohort of dental nurses who that's their progression. So the competition is really, really strong. And also, I think it might be seen as a slightly less stressful version of dentistry.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't disagree. I think being a dentist is extremely stressful, having to do all that, messy work that I don't want to do, see those nerve tissues and stuff that I don't want to see. So yeah, I think it's a really high amount of competition.
And are there more training places coming up, or has it sort of been relatively static?
Do you know there's not one training option in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, for hygienists and therapists anymore. The dental school shut down; they don't do it anymore. I think there has been some chat about changing the way dental hygiene could be delivered as a course, and it could be delivered more of an apprenticeship style, which is very interesting. I don't know how that would work, but no, I don't think there's that many places. I think it's tricky. If you think there's often 40 or 50 places in each school for hygiene and therapy, but then 200 for dentists. There's not a lot.
And you've created your own course, haven't you? You've got the Modern Therapist as a course. So talk to us about that and what that is and what that looks like and how that's going to help.
As opposed to the old therapist.
Yeah.
I don't, because I got in trouble for that the other day.
Seriously?
I did get in trouble, yeah. No, so basically I told you, I alluded to the fact that I didn't do therapy for a long time. And actually even my training as a therapist was pretty basic. I mean, I think I did 10 amalgams, 10 composites, and that was you done, right? You've trained, well done. And so when I decided that I was going to rebel and change and get into this, system again and be a therapist again, I spent, thousands of pounds, on going on loads of different dentists, CPD training courses. So I sat in on courses about occlusion, courses about onlays and crowns, composite courses, of course, ortho courses. I went into courses that I could never use because I needed to learn these things in order to be able to feel confident to dental therapy. And what I noticed two things. One was that there was really nothing there for just therapists. So every time I went to a composite course, they would say, well, in this case, you would do ortho first, or in this case, you need to put a crown. And that didn't speak to me as a therapist, because what do I do if I can't do that?
Yeah.
And then the other thing was that, sad to say, I felt really marginalised on a lot of those courses. I was left out. No one spoke to me. There was an awful lot of,
because you're a therapist?
Yeah. Why am I here? Why
you're not one of us?
Have you actually got a job?
Oh wow.
And I remember one dentist said to me, "Well, can I just train my dental nurse to do your job?" It was like quite disrespectful.
Wow.
So I decided that I'm quite thick-skinned. I can take it, but other therapists out there who I want to come on this journey with me, who I want to grow, who I want to develop and provide that confidence for, I don't want them to go through what I went through. So I built the Modern Therapist as a training brand that it's got two aims. One is to make therapists confident, amazing, awesome, modern therapists. And by modern, what I mean is, the up-to-date techniques and progressive and pushing for more. But also to the Modern Therapist is a training brand, not just composite course, but also with practices in mind. So I train practices how to use a therapist, because there's not a lot of point in getting therapists amazing at being therapy if they can't get a job.
Yeah.
Right? And
you must also have something in there about confidence and communication with the therapist, because obviously you are quite ballsy by the sounds of things, a bit of a rebel. So therefore you're happy to go head to head with someone. But as you say, part of your course, I presume, is sort of saying, this is the way you deal with people and communication skills.
It really is an awful lot of what we speak about at the beginning. So we always have a chat at the beginning, and everyone, it feels really comfortable. Everyone feels like they can share their concerns, their problems, what they're facing. And we sort of hash it out. We have an hour at the beginning where we're saying, okay, well, what situation are you in? Where would you like to be? How are you going to get there? We talk about, things like portfolios. Dentists all have their VT year to create a portfolio of what work they do and showcase what they can do. Well, therapists don't get that. So we talk about how to create a portfolio. We talk about, how to...
It's true, actually. You don't even think about that, but you're right, yeah.
Because there's no reason why a therapist couldn't showcase their work on Instagram to the same extent that a dentist would.
And when you go for a job, as you say, show what I've done. This is what I've done.
But also, we've got to look at it from a practice owner point of view. Why would you employ someone who can't show the work?
Yeah, no, it makes it's a real simple one, isn't it? Actually,
Who's leading this charge with you, Kat? Because it at times must feel like you're a bit of a sole voice. Are there a band of you? Have you got like if we did like a wide angle shot? Are there a bunch of other therapists kind of loitering in the background?
There are hundreds of amazing therapists. I don't know. I think we're all speaking about it in our own way, right? So there are therapists who, like you say, they showcase their work on Instagram, and they are incredible. I if I could be that talented with my composite work, then I would be a very happy lady. So there's therapists that do it that way. There's therapists who speak about therapy in the same way that I do. They write articles, and they are very progressive in their own way. And then obviously we've got two associations that have tried really hard to push the sort of more political side, I imagine, is the best way to describe it, of therapy as well. So, there's loads of us doing this, but I wonder whether maybe I just shout louder. And that's why, maybe it's, the modern therapist looks like it's just me, but it's not. There's tons of modern therapists out there.
And I think that's it. I think, you've obviously built a platform to be able to talk about this, which is great. And I think sometimes when something's new and different, you do need somebody that kind of spearheads it.
Champion.
But it's great to hear that it's not just you. There's a bunch of other people who are all kind of coming along as well, because for you, it must be incredibly hard to do this if you were on your own, because at times it must feel like you're banging your head against a brick wall. We're not necessarily getting the breakthrough that you need. So the fact there's a bunch of people, and there's support from the associations as well, it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I think what's important is that we all sing from the same hymn sheet. Everyone's saying the same thing. Well, just the fact. This is the scope of practice. And educating dentists on the fact that this is actually the scope of practice. This is what we're allowed to do. We're not making it up. But yeah, I'm really fortunate that there are.
I presume it's probably similar in a way to when hygienists first started. Do you know that there was a resistance about hygienists and what are you going to do and all that sort of stuff, and then that has become accepted, and there's probably
similar.
That's on the similar trajectory as saying no, actually we can do a decent job.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. When the first hygienist went into practice, do you really think the dentist went, oh, amazing?
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, lovely. Great. Yeah.
We're going to clear off all my patients into the Of course they didn't. But it's got that way because the dentist has suddenly realised that why am I doing this? Why do it?
Yeah.
It's so funny that it's not normal just to think that way about therapy, but we'll get there.
Yeah, but they haven't embraced it. I find that quite strange.
No.
But there again, I suppose it goes back to a way that when we talk about people understanding business.
Oh, yeah.
They don't, there's not a connection, even if it's purely a financial connection. That
between
says,
the merits
actually,
and the
if you do it
benefits.
this way, you'll probably end up making more money. And maybe having less stress. But they don't necessarily do that connection. Interesting.
There's lots of practices that are actually embracing therapy. So I've got, there's a practice in Preston that's therapist-led completely, Cure Clinics by Chris Ball. He's a friend and he's amazing. He's put this therapy-led clinic in Preston. He's opening another one soon. And there are practices that are really embracing it now. And obviously, you've spoken to Sarika Shah. She's my principal. And she's just been incredible at letting me take the reins and do what I want to do with therapy. But it's in its infancy.
Got an empty shop over the road. That's what she put.
I was just thinking, as a dental care professional and a GDC number, you can own a practice. Are there therapists out there that own practices?
Absolutely. There's one on the road that I'm on right now. There's therapist-owned clinics. Not a lot of them because of the barriers that we've got. So again, prescribing barriers, medical emergencies kits. Those are a barrier at the moment because therapists can't buy the medicines that they need for a medical emergency kit. Isn't that insane?
And that is nuts.
So you can't buy it. We still can't buy a local anaesthetic without a dentist, although we can now use exemptions. We can't buy it. So owning a practice as a therapist is tricky. It's doable.
There's also a commercial issue as well, in that banks won't treat
funders won't be as
hygienists and therapists in the same category as dentists. So the funding facilities made available to dentists are way more preferential than you would receive as a therapist.
But also, look, you have to see that there is a reason for this. As a therapist, I can't hope to earn the same as a dentist. I can't, because I can't do the same high earning treatments. I can't whack an implant in every day, and have a huge turnover. And so your traditional owner operator method of a principal dentist being the first person to start making money and getting money into your clinic, that's not going to work for a therapist. A therapist is going to need somebody else to come and be an earner within their business. And so you can see why it's hard to lend to a model like that. It really very much hinges on the fact that you have to get a dentist, and we all know how hard that is these days.
Yeah. People listening to this podcast are going to be surprised to know that you describe yourself as an introverted extrovert. And I think most of us are. Yeah, we have this phrase about being a synthetic extrovert. I think lots of us kind of like put on a mask and become a character.
At least Cat can play the piano and sing.
Yes. What is your default state? What is your happy state?
So I love to be on stage. So I absolutely seriously, I'm really into my musicals, love the jazz hands, love to be on stage. Like I say, I used to sing and play all sorts of musical instruments. I love that. So I can.
Do I have a recollection? Did we have a conversation about your brother? Your brother's big in theatre, isn't he?
No, that's not me.
Is that not you? I thought there's somebody in dentist whose brother is like massive in West End productions. I can't remember who it is. I'll remember who it is, but it's somebody who's, and they're like proper big time, like proper West End musicals.
The next event we see Cat at, if there's a piano.
Yeah,
a piano and a piano, a bar, and a microphone. You're in, girl.
Anyway, so you love the stage.
Yeah, so I love the stage. I love an audience. I can do an audience, that's fine, and I can get quite a lot of energy from that. But like one-on-one or a group of 2 or 3 people, I find that quite difficult. I find it difficult to keep a conversation going.
That's what we're here for. That's fine.
Potentially, I might be.
Thank goodness.
I don't know whether it might be an ADHD tendency, maybe, but I might drift off. My mind might drift off.
Oh, nice.
And so
back in the room.
After doing that, if I've had a group that I'm talking to for a long time, I need an hour to myself in silence. And quite often when I'm running a course or doing a full day training, I will take myself off at lunchtime and hide for half an hour so I don't have to talk to anybody. Not that I don't want to, but I just need a reset.
I find that though sometimes, don't you? When we do our seminars or even our webinars, when you'll come down,
it's like quite full on.
Oh, it's a little bit of an adrenaline high that's sort of slowly leaking out. Yeah. No, I sort of get it. Yeah.
I take that reset time and I allow myself that. In the past, I used to feel really guilty that I wasn't engaging with everyone all the time and I wasn't being that jazz handy person all the time for everyone. But actually taking that reset time means that I can really think about how has this been going today? What are the responses? I feel like you can feel people when you're with them in a room.
Yeah.
You can feel how they're feeling. And I want to make sure that I honour how they're feeling in the next time I'm speaking to them and not just breeze past them and be in my own head about what I'm thinking. So
are you quite a reflective person?
Yeah, I do. I will go away after this conversation and think, did I say everything I wanted to say? And then, you'll go over everything.
Okay.
Replay it all. I'm that person. I sort of ruminate a lot over conversations and just to make sure that I am being authentic and getting across what I really mean.
So if you could play back time on a longer time frame, would you qualify as a therapist again if you had your time again?
Do you know, if we really went back, maybe I should have tried harder in those A-levels. Instead, I got a job in a sports car, right? So there isn't much of a regret there, because I used to race a lot. I used to race cars and motorbikes and stuff. So let's not go into that conversation, but I love cars.
You brought that in sort of like 40 odd minutes in. Come on, we should have that right at the beginning.
I love cars, and so that's the reason I didn't really do well in my A-levels, because I went and got a job, worked really hard, and bought myself a sports car. But if I had done my A-levels properly and gotten into dental school, I was accepted into Manchester if I had done got my A-level results. Maybe I'd have loved dentistry and done actual extractions and crowns and stuff like that. And I think I've got the manual dexterity to do a really good job and be a really great dentist. So potentially that would have been something. But I'm so happy as I am. You know, it is a lower stress job. I really believe that. It's a slightly lower stress job. There isn't the pressure on me as a therapist that there is on a dentist to do things like own a practice, which is a very traditional pressure I think a lot of dentists feel. There isn't that pressure on me. And also, I'm so fortunate I've got huge flexibility in my life. You know, I've had 3 children. We holiday. I have a lovely life outside of work as well, that's non-dental related, lots of lovely friends, you know, great family. So I, as much as I would like to think, you know, in another life I could maybe have been more of a businesswoman or more successful or something like that, it might have been to the detriment of all the wonderful things I've got now.
I think there's always a cost. I think
there's a definition of success, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think lots of people, it's very easy just to see the bit that people post about their life, but generally there's a cost of some sort for whatever success we have. There's another side to it that something we don't always own up to or recognise. But it sounds to me like you've got quite a nice balance in your world.
Mostly.
I like the link between, as we've seen quite a few times, between art and dentistry. You know, and that piano.
The creative side,
that sort of dexterity. It's fascinating. It's that creative bit that seems to quite often when we talk to people in dentistry, there's something in there that's sort of like, I quite like making models.
Out of interest, what music do you have playing in your surgery?
Oh, I don't get a choice. Isn't that awful? But also,
seriously, you don't get a choice.
It's the same music across all surgeries.
Wow.
But also, as I said at the beginning, I don't really do popular culture. So if you asked me what music I haven't got
Wagner.
I mean, I'm easy. I would listen to rap, and I'd listen to classics. I'll listen to anything. I'm not that person that there's music going and it irritates me. There is no time where it's annoying or I don't like it.
An eclectic mix, I think, which is the way to have music.
A preference. I don't have maybe I know I feel like it's a bit weird.
No, I think it's a great thing, because otherwise the danger is you end up getting pigeonholed, and there's actually good music in virtually every genre. More interesting, what sports car did you buy?
Now it's
is it an embarrassing sports car?
So I used to do standing quarter miles in a Subaru Impreza.
Wow.
Yeah, okay.
So proper racing.
So that, and then also I bought a smart car, but it's a smart roadster, you know, the short fat.
Little one.
And we actually dropped a Hayabusa motorbike engine in it and used it to go round rounds.
I bet that was fast.
I bet that went quick.
And that one actually, I crashed into the back of a lorry once. And so that one got written off. And then later on, a couple of years later, I bought another smart car, which I had spray painted bright pink. And I drove that for a number of years until I fell pregnant with my twins. We had to buy a house. And in order to buy the house, my poor husband had to sell his BMW because he had to come with something to put the deposit down. And so he started driving the pink smart car. And
Excellent.
He drove that for about 4 years, bless him. And on the back, I had actually had the badge changed from smart to tart.
Oh, bless him.
So I love him. But he actually really enjoyed driving that car.
Yeah, well, distinctive. I tell you, it stands out. Flipping it.
Outstanding.
They're so much fun.
Outstanding. Cat, we've got to the point where we need to ask you a couple of questions.
Brilliant.
First one is, you're a fly on the wall and you look down, what's playing out? Where are you, and who's in there?
Oh, so I said earlier that as a family, we're really into musicals. And so most recently, we took our 3 children to go and see Hamilton, the musical.
Okay, yeah.
So I've got massive FOMO. I've always had it. I'm that person. I want to be in the room everywhere. So if I could be on the fly on the wall in every room, in every situation, that'd be great, please. But with this question, because I know you ask it of everyone, I was thinking I would like to be in the room where it happened, where Alexander Hamilton made the deal to get, Washington as the capital city, and I want to know what happened there, because no one really knows what happened in that room. It's called the compromise. It was called the compromise dinner, and so I'd love to be a fly on the wall there. And find out what happened, just so I could tell my children, really, because they keep asking me.
Fabulous music.
Just
well,
make it up.
No,
don't
fabulous music.
I love that song as well. It's always in my head.
Yeah. And our follow-up is, you can meet somebody. Who would you like to meet if you were given the opportunity?
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because you'd want to say, in my heart of all hearts, I want to say, I want to meet a really progressive, a female who's changed the world, who's broken glass ceilings and been a rebel or changed something in some way. But because we're so lucky and we've got history books and we've got Google and we can Wikipedia things, I feel like I've learnt about those people. I know about Rosa Parks. I know about Florence Nightingale. I know about even Michelle Obama, right? I know about her. What I want to do is meet the next person who's going to do these things. I want to meet the next person to make a massive change, especially in for females, for women in the world. The next person that's going to break a glass ceiling or not fall off of a glass cliff. I don't know if you know that term, but it's when women are put into positions of power, but only put in that position of power because they're likely to fail. So, for instance, a company is failing already, and they go, "Well, let's get a female CEO in and see if they can help us out." Wow. And it's like setting someone up for failure. Yeah. Well, I want to meet the next person to not fail when they're in those situations, and watch that play out. I don't want to hear about it having happened. I want to watch it. I want to be with them
in real time. Yeah. Oh, that would be cool.
Going to be.
What I love about that is we can understand the context and the situation, but we will never know who that person is, because until it happens, it was only ever
the dream,
the point before.
And I've got some really strong female best friends who are outside of dentistry who are doing that at the moment. So I've got a friend who she's the Polled of Sunday Times, Caroline Wheeler, and she actually broke the bloodborne virus scandal. Her whole political and journalistic career has been around that. So watching her go from a local journalist, when we had our twins in the same week in the same hospital, so we've been friends ever since. And the last 12 years, she's been breaking this bloodborne virus scandal. And now there's been an inquiry, and now there's going to be compensation. Watching this really strong woman progress and break their ceilings and become an editor of a big newspaper and stuff like that. I find it so empowering. It makes me, want to push for my own profession as well.
Very cool.
Brilliant.
Cat, thank you so much.
Yeah, fantastic.
Like I say, I think you've got a really important role to play in dentistry, and you have been playing a really important role. I think the work you're doing, pushing forward the voice for therapists along with others is hugely valuable for the profession. People will take a lot from this, I'm sure.
Thank you.
They should do anyway.
No, yeah, exactly. Lovely. Well, keep well. And yeah, no doubt we'll be seeing you at an event at some point in the future.
Near a piano.
Well. Yes, exactly.
King's Cross Station.
to brush up on my skills. It's been a while.
Do you not play now then?
No, it's really sad, but we don't have a piano. I haven't had a piano in my house for about 10 years now. The children, I wanted to teach them to play, but they wouldn't listen to me. And then what's even more sad, if you really want to know the truth, is that I worked so hard for that grade 8. I'm not talented in the slightest. I'm just hardworking. And so to get that exam done was blood, sweat and tears, and I don't have a natural ability. I just had that. So as soon as you stop practicing, you can't really play it. I can play it, I can tinkle, I can make things sound lovely, I can do it, but I'm not fantastic.
Wow. So if anyone wants to gift Cat a piano or a keyboard, please.
Baby grand would be perfect.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, not okay. Anybody? Well, she's got expensive taste.
I was going to say, if you're asking, you might as well ask for the best. Brilliant. Look after yourself, Cat. Keep well.
Thanks very
Cheers.
much. Cheers. Lovely.
Ta-da. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.